Every day, thousands of video game consumers find themselves unsatisfied with their purchases and the state of the gaming industry. These are their stories.
Well, as a kid, I had Super Nintendo, and Mortal Kombat was a big thing on those older consoles.
I first got into gaming with Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. I like to stick with that storyline-based, character development kind of game.
Yeah, I started around 3 years old. My first game was Tetris on the Game Boy.
Nintendo 64 was a real big thing in my house. PlayStation, when that came out, I had to have it. Like, it was definitely something I needed. I found myself playing video games pretty much every day, all day, mostly after school, anytime I could, so.
Super Mario World when I was a kid. I started off on the Super Nintendo, and then I went from there. So, I did all the stages in between: GameCube, Xbox 360, PC.
We here at Risky Business Incorporated took it upon ourselves to talk with gamers about their perceived roles within gaming culture as a whole. For many, we discovered that millennial-aged gamers entered into the culture as children and felt a strong nostalgia for early generation console games, but have since become disenfranchised by developers' propensity to cut corners in development and attempts to manipulate consumers into paying more for a lower quality of product.
Nowadays, I try to play as much as I can. I tend to dabble in different areas, RTS games, first-person shooters, third-person shooters, third-person action games.
Nowadays, I stick to mostly games that just have a good story to it. I don't really get sucked into the multiplayer as much anymore because I really don't have time to compete with people. So I usually just buy games that fit my interests, I would say. Story-wise, I play the game. I enjoy what the developers did with the story, the characters. I don't have time to sit around and play the multiplayer and stick around, so I'm usually I treat it like reading a book. Like I play the game, I enjoy it, and then I trade it in the next day because that's it for me.
I feel like it was better to have the games growing up, the more finished games, it held my attention more. It was better to just sit there for hours and days, months, especially with Zelda when I was younger. It took me forever, maybe over a year to play that game, and that's pretty ridiculous. But it still kept my attention, and I definitely think that it was worth the money for that back then.
That's how I was raised on gaming, because before there was no expansive multiplayer content for video games. It was all story-based.
Versus today, where I'm a great example of it. We're just getting tired of them right away. You play it for a little bit and you're done with it.
Most college-aged gamers who once felt embraced by developers now feel taken advantage of. Younger gamers with limited budgets feel that developers promise more than they can deliver in terms of gameplay mechanics, story, and character development. More often than not, games are sold littered with bugs, shipped in half-finished states, with developers relying on the ability to patch broken games as a crutch.
You're paying 60 plus, you kind of want the game done like with the older games, I want to say before online play became a factor in today's consoles, if I'm paying for this game, it should be done. And even the companies back then knew that because they couldn't, you can't add DLC to Ocarina of Time back in the day. If there was something wrong, you couldn't patch it up. So nowadays it's like people kind of have to expect that something's going to be not finished completely. There's patches, updates, and
I really don't feel like I'm getting as much bang for my buck now, more so than before with the older games. It feels like the companies are rushing, especially with the first-person shooters, and more so the Call of Duty. There's a game coming out like every year with them. Granted, it's like a different title and maybe a different series, but still, it's how long is that train gonna ride? I'll play a few hours, beat the storyline, whatever that is, play with my friends a couple times, and then I just get bored with it real easily. More like at the one and done games, trade it back in real quick.
I'd say quality's definitely dropped over the past 10 years, 15 years, whenever. I mean, it's just dropped. There's nothing great about games anymore, it seems like to me. Like I mentioned earlier, GoldenEye was a real heavy favorite of mine, and they re-released it for, I believe, the recent generation of consoles. And to me, it just didn't hit the same way that the 007 from the Nintendo 64 did.
I think with certain AAA developers, there are some that tend to release unfinished projects that tend to be buggy, as in with Battlefield 4, with the multiplayer not working at all.
PlayStation 4 just came out. I bought it as soon as I found one, and first game I purchased was Battlefield 4. Battlefield 4 is pretty fun, very good shooter. The only problem is when I picked it up, the story wasn't really there. It just didn't feel complete. And then on top of it, once I finished the game, I had to pay, $50 a month? Or not $50 a month, $50 a year for PlayStation Plus, which they didn't used to do. So I feel like I didn't really get a full game for my $60.
Right.
And there's no point in me spending $110 to play one game. It just seems ridiculous to me.
I think the problem with like SimCity and stuff like that was the online component it wasn't really justified. So you had, they kind of had like a in-game economy where you'd have cities and you'd be able to trade between cities using, online connection. So, your commodities would have value in, other players' cities, but it wasn't really a good part of the experience. I mean, like SimCities in the past, you would be able to have a city and it'd be able to do everything. You could have a city that would, have sewage and all these different, utilities and stuff like that, and it was a self-sufficient city. Now you can't have that because you have to rely on other online players, and it takes away from the single player experience. The problem was that at the time it was completely online. So I would experience where the server would go down, something would happen with their side of the server, and even though I would be basically playing the single player part of the game, it would still crash on me and I wouldn't be able to play anymore until the servers were working again, which is kind of an issue.
An often overlooked facet of gaming in the modern age is that the culture encompasses a broad variety of people. Gone are the days when video games were developed for children and teenage boys. Many casual mobile games are developed for older men and women who are arguably less informed on the seedier practices in game development, which increase profits at lower cost to developers. Pay-to-play model games such as Farmville, Plants vs. Zombies 2, and Candy Crush often dupe consumers into paying more of their money to make a subpar gaming experience more bearable.
If you look at the stats for the average gamer, I think the average gamer is like a 46-year-old woman. So, I mean, things have changed a lot, and I think part of that is the casual games. And I think that things like, Candy Crush or something like that, where they kind of make you you know, they draw you in with the mechanic, but then they make you want to pay. I think it's a little bit like, almost like gambling, basically. You kind of trap people in with these gameplay mechanics that kind of, they do the risk-reward kind of thing where they actually kind of mess with the brain, basically. They you know, have you release these endorphins by, you know, winning little things. And so, you know, your body, you know, kind of gets used to these little, you know, these little wins that kind of release all these feel-good hormones. And then, like, you want more and more. And then they, like, hide it behind, like if it was Farmville or something, they would have timers where, you know, you have to wait another 2 hours or a day or something like that for your, you know, whatever digital item it is to, like, come back. So I think when you can buy stuff like, you know, extra time and stuff like that, it kind of, it's almost like addicting in the way that, like, drugs are addicting. It's not so much addicting in the way that it's like, oh, this game's so fun, I can't wait to play it, because, you know, it's entertaining. It's more like, I need to do this because my brain has become addicted to this risk-reward feeling, you know, this kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like the next rush that you get from getting those, you know, extra coins or whatever. I would say it's different than a game where you purchase it, you know, one-time purchase, and then you know, get a full experience out of it.
Throughout our conversations with the gamers we interviewed, we came to realize that all of the perceived problems between developers and consumers, such as DRM implementation, on-disk DLC, and pay-to-play models, could be solved if gamers were more selective with their purchases.
You know, you're getting it in 2 parts, but at least you're getting the game now. And I feel like video gamers do that all the time, you know, like, they want the game out now, but they don't want to wait for it to be done. Again, with the new BioShock game, that one was pushed back like a few months to a year. But I was one of those people saying, you know, this is a good thing. This means they get to polish it, they get to fix it, they get to make sure it looks and performs nicely. Instead of, hey, we want the game out now, and then why are all these problems here? So
I feel like the gamers themselves need to just take it upon themselves to educate them. There's countless of websites and, you know, developers that are just posting all this information on their sites, just about everything about their game. You know, and especially with, like, waiting to, like, the conventions when they release all, like, the other big news. People just need to get on that and, you know, educating themselves so they won't be disappointed when something comes up saying, oh, instead of this game being completely finished, here's just the first part, and then here's some DLC to have, you know, later on. So you're still going to pay the $60, but you still have to pay the extra money for the downloadable content later on. I mean, it's kind of like a little robbery right there. It's not really fair for the consumers. And then ever since that, it was just downhill from there.
I feel like gamers should vote with their wallet. They should pay for games that are worth their time and that are quality products.
I mean, I don't think that on launch day of an online game, they should still be beta testing. I think that, you know, beta testing is for the beta stage, it's not for the completed game. And I think a lot of developers nowadays kind of rely too much on fixing things after the game's been released instead of before. Things that should have been kind of addressed during the beta testing. And so you have, you know, games that are really, really buggy that are released, but they probably shouldn't have been. And I mean, I think that's just a scheduling thing. I don't think that's really necessarily something that, you know, the gamer should have to deal with.
We here at Risky Business Incorporated feel that it is up to us as gamers to bring about a cultural shift in game development to a higher quality of product. It is our responsibility to educate ourselves and each other in order to maintain the integrity of the culture we all know and love.